Hello, this is MJ, and we're up for another podcast voicemail message about the art of love. I was listening to a podcast recently by some people I met, some friends, and they talked about chivalry. And at the end of the episode, they were asking the listeners, basically, do you think chivalry is dead, and if so, why is that? So it's interesting because not too long ago I was walking my dog, and it was like right after like at the end of school, like around 3 or something like that, and in front of me there was this mom with her two kids, one daughter who looked like she was probably like 7 or 8, and a son who probably looks like it was like 6 or 7 type thing. Not a huge difference between the two, but he looked younger. At least he was shorter, a little bit shorter. And the boy was walking probably 6 feet ahead of them, frolicking, whatever, walking ahead in his mind, doing his thing. And the mom and the daughter were behind, like about 6 feet behind. The daughter was carrying her backpack, and the mom was carrying the son's backpack, what it seems like, because the son had nothing. And I was just looking at this. I'm like, what are we teaching kids? What is this boy learning? Because there he is coming back from school with no weight on his shoulder because his mom's carrying it for him, so he doesn't have to worry about that. And her daughter doesn't get the weight lifted off her shoulder. So right away, like, I'm thinking, is this like a weird way subconsciously teaching boys, later men, that they don't have to do the work? Because at his age, like 6, like, I was just like, I mean, it could be whatever he did. The boy did not look like he was, sick or weak or anything. He was just kind of like doing his own thing. And his mom carried his bag for him. And I was like, it's just an instance. Again, I don't know the circumstances. It's just the image that I saw. And it made me think, like, is this one of the source of the problems that we have nowadays, where a lot of men are not chivalrous, essentially. So yeah, that's one thing that came to mind. And there's another video that I saw on TikTok probably a couple of months ago. It was at some sort of like fair, I guess it's a fair or a game. Maybe it was a game or something like that. And there was a mime that was like in the crowd, and there were people walking like near, I don't know if it's like near a field or stadium, but like there's basically the place where like all the benches are, people are sitting down. There's like a place where people walk, and then there was a woman that was walking. She was carrying a toddler, like a baby, probably less than 2-year-old. Yeah, most likely less than 2-year-old. And she had a big backpack, and she was just walking, and she walked in front of the mime, and the mime was looking at her, and then he kind of looked around looking for the dad, and sure enough, the dad was not far, like a little bit behind her, carrying nothing. And the backpack that she had was heavy. So the mime took the backpack off of the shoulder of the woman and put it on the hands of the dad. And I think people were applauding, and he was kind of just looking at the dad, like, just obviously he can't speak because he's a mime, but gesturing, basically saying like, what the hell? Like, what are you doing? You should help her. Like, she shouldn't have to carry the baby and the giant backpack, and you're just walking around like nothing. What are you doing? So this, and it's kind of funny because now I'm thinking about it, like, I'm wondering the phenomena of that little boy that I saw while I was walking my dog, where he didn't have to do anything because his mom was carrying the stuff for him. Doesn't that translate into the dad who also doesn't feel or even like register in his mind that, dude, like, you're supposed to help and support? Like, what the hell? Like, she's not supposed to do everything. Where your manners, like, why don't you care a little bit more? Obviously not men are like that, but it is something that we see often enough, or at least people complain about often enough, that should be addressed. And that kind of come to this idea of chivalry. Like, is chivalry dead? What's going on? And I mean, they talk about the whole episode, about like what it is and what it implies and stuff like that, and how it's old school from the time of knights and stuff like that. But the thing that I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into is, what is the cause of that? Like, what has caused this change, or this idea of like, there's debates about whether a man should open the door for a woman, or if he should open the car, if he should drive her back to her place, or who should pay, and all these type of thing. And because of the fact that I go to events, like singles events, where we actually have conversation about, dating and the difference in cultures, and what's expected, what's not expected, what's taken advantage of, and what's not. It's interesting to kind of look into this idea of what has changed. Like, why is it like that? So one of the things that comes to mind, first of all, this idea of chivalry, like, I don't know why there's not that I know of, there's no equivalent of being chivalrous for the women's side. And then I was looking at one of the definition of chivalry, and it says it is a combination of qualities expected of an ideal knight, especially courage, honor, courtesy, justice, and readiness to help the weak. There's got to be some sort of women equivalent to that, but I'm not quite sure. But at the end of the day, it's really a question of being present, being mindful, treating other people around you with care, and being empathetic, and not being selfish, type of thing, and try as much as possible to make people's life better because you're around them. So in terms of what would be the cause of this change, this switch, that I don't think is a good thing, because it's interesting, in one of the conversation that I've had in these events, when we were talking about this idea of like chivalry and like roles of the masculine and the feminine, and I'm going to talk a lot about that because I know that there's so many changes in terms of like men and women are equal and all these type of things, and there's still a difference. As far as I'm concerned, there's a difference between the two. There's a difference in the way that we approach things and perceive the world and all these type of things. And I think that it's important for, the majority or a good portion of the population. There's always exception, but it's important to look into it and try to understand what's happening, type of thing. So when we were talking about this idea of the different roles that back in the days that men and women had, and men had to open the door for women, and they were kind of in charge, for lack of better words, not the best term, but of the woman's safety and things like that. And they would have to be the one asking her out on a date, and then if a woman was interested, she could signal that she was interested, but without going the distance of asking the man. So they were like a couple roles back in the days. From I wasn't living in those time, like I wasn't born yet, but those are the stories that I heard. But the thing that was interesting when we were talking about like how this must have affect the dynamic between men and women in a relationship is that it created a polarity. Well, first of all, they knew what they had to do, but it also created a polarity. And when you're talking about attraction between the male and the female principle, the male and the female energy, opposites attract, right? So if there's not enough differences in energy, it's not necessarily going to be as attractive for most people, not everybody, obviously. And it is possible that some of these gestures that are seen, more for men or more for women, when they're seen by the opposite, it create like a stronger attraction, essentially. So when I see things like, and that's from my own personal observation, men that are complaining, not all men, some men, that are complaining about having who has to pay and who has to drive and who has to call, and they don't always want to do this. I mean, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, obviously, we're not looking, a lot of this serious women, obviously the one that are not gold diggers, not trying to take advantage, are really looking for a relationship. They're not looking to take advantage of a man, but they're looking for a man who behave in a certain way that we find attractive. So for me, as a woman, a man that does not take a certain amount of initiative, who's like always like looking to make sure that they're not taken advantage of, like complaining, all these type of things, as opposed to, taking a stand, believing in what you do and having principle and this type of thing, like that's a little bit more attractive. And for me, somebody who is going to be more courteous, a man that's going to be more courteous, who actually wants to open the door and wants to make me feel like a woman type of thing, who wants to provide, and not necessarily provide in terms of like giving money or whatever, but like take care, like wants to make sure that I know that he cares and I am of value to him, and he's going to do whatever he can to be able to make sure that he protects that. Like he understands that as his woman, I'm valuable, and wants to protect that type of thing. That makes a difference. But it seems like there's been a lot of, I guess, confusion. I was looking at some of the comments that some people were saying, and even I think in the podcast as well, where they were saying like one of the things that affected this idea of chivalry was feminism, like this idea of the woman that does not need a man, she can do whatever, she can do everything the same and this type of thing. I'm like, yeah, maybe in a way it like shifted a bit, but also I would say that a lot of the men kind of just resigned themselves or took advantage of not having to do, feeling that they don't have to do anything, because now it's an equal world. Like I feel like both sides are taking advantage of the opportunity to procrastinate or to be more lazy when it comes to relationship, because of the fact that that's almost like an excuse. Like, oh, because of the fact that now women can do the same thing as men can do, we don't have to do this anymore. We don't have to be courteous anymore. And it's kind of like, that's not the point, I don't think. It still makes a difference to be considerate to the person that you're with. So opening the door for somebody, there's nothing, like if the intention is sincere, there's nothing wrong with opening the door. And yes, of course, it's very possible that a woman can open the door for a man too. Like it depends if you're there first or whatever. But like there's nothing wrong with it. And it's interesting because I hear sometimes some men complaining that some women would get offended if they open the door for them. And I'm wondering, I'm sure there are some potentially, but I'm wondering, like, all women really? Because I would just, unless, there's an intention of doing something inappropriate or expecting something out of it, as opposed to just being courteous. Like, you're here, you're carrying a bunch of stuff, let me open the door for you, as opposed to you're here, you're carrying a bunch of stuff, well, you think that you're equal to us anyways, so you open the door yourself, type of thing. Like that's the difference. So I was trying to think about what are some of the reason why this idea of being chivalrous is, I don't think it's dead, personally. I think it's being suffocated by things like laziness, cynicism, emotional detachment, self-protection, lack of courage, lack of self-assurance. I think those things, and probably a lot more, are the cause, or some of the causes, why this idea of chivalry is not as prominent anymore. And it seems like these things are essentially, in a way, trying to suffocate this idea of chivalry and whatever the equivalent is for women. I don't know what the equivalent is for women, and it's something that would be interesting to kind of like dive deeper into it, because I think some people, or most of us, see chivalry as like a man doing things to make a woman comfortable. And I'm trying to think, what would be the equivalent of a woman doing things to make the man feel comfortable? And the only thing that I could come up with would be to allow them to be themselves without criticizing, too much criticizing at all, because that criticizing can be a blow to the self-esteem and kind of like cause them to shrink and do the opposite. Obviously they have to deserve it. You can't just, encourage somebody who's not really doing anything that deserve that type of encouragement. But like I'm assuming when you're dating, or when you're married or whatever, to not try to make him, for the woman, be like her, accept the fact that there's a difference between the two, and vice versa, type of thing. So allow the, I guess, masculine energy to express itself, as long as it's healthy and safe and all these type of thing. But not criticize that part, because I forget which podcast that I was listening to. It was a man that was talking about the state of the issues a lot of men nowadays, not really having an outlet to be men, and having to kind of like suppress a lot of their natural ways of being. And I'm not talking about like the toxic stuff, but just like, if you want to be active, they have a lot of testosterone, want to be active, want to talk all the time, want to be productive, want to have a goal, a purpose, a mission, type of thing, not necessarily agree with everything. Like you don't have to wear nail polish if they don't want to, and that doesn't mean that they have any whatchamacallit, they don't have anything against that. But it's not because other men are doing it that they have to do it as well, because it's not an honest expression of their masculinity, whatever that means, because it varies from one man to the other, type of thing. So yeah, it's something that's interesting to look into, and perhaps, I'm assuming, discuss about that a little bit more in some of the events that I'm going. And maybe when I learn a little bit more about it, I can kind of go back into it. But the point of it was just to start paying attention into these things that we call evolution, or new way of thinking, or whatever, that sometimes can actually affect the health of relationship between couples. Because things like thinking more like self-love, and thinking more about yourself and self-expression and stuff like that, it's great and all. And feminism and equality and stuff like that, it's all great. But there's a fine line between thinking only about you, and thinking about you inside a relationship, or you with like in rapport to the other, in relationship with another, and finding some sort of balance to be able to make sure that as much as possible everybody is content. Because I'm not convinced that this idea, well, I'm not convinced that we don't need one another. That's the main thing. Like men need women need men. So this idea of like separating and fighting against each other and trying to figure out like who's got the right answer doesn't make any sense. That's why I think that it's important to, for most of us, I know not all of us, but for most of us, or a lot of us, there is a difference. And the difference, diversity is a good thing. We need the diversity. That's what makes people interesting, and that's what makes relationship interesting. Because a lot of us, I don't want to say most of us, I don't know, but I would assume a lot of us are not looking to be with a mirror version of us. We're looking to be with somebody who we can grow with, learn with, be attracted to, be intrigued by. And that's the way that healthy relationship can grow, when we accept and understand, well, at least accept the differences. And throughout the relationship, we kind of have this stance where we're looking to see how we fit and what we can create together, by bringing different aspects, flaws and skills together, and see what we can create. It kind of brings me back to this the introduction podcast that I was talking about before, when I was talking about this idea of like, we kind of come in, we're all artists coming in with our own colors, our own tools, and we have this the blank canvas, a relationship, and we create something together, acknowledging the fact that we're carrying different colors. But because of the fact that we have two different colors, we can create a third color, and we could create something way more interesting than if we only had one of the same, or we're trying to erase one to be able to make sure that our color takes precedent in the relationship. So yeah, those are just like little things that were coming to my mind, and I thought that I would share. Hopefully it's not too all over the place. Again, that's why it's really just kind of like a voicemail more than a professional podcast, because I'm just sharing, my thoughts, my thinking process, my insight, things that I learn, and to kind of share and exchange, and eventually hopefully get some comments and feedback to be able to continue to grow and learn from that, and make sure that whatever relationship that we are into or get into are beneficial for all parties. So yeah, let me know what you think. Is what are the causes of this change of chivalry? Is it even something that we should be concerned about, or not? And because of the fact that it's changing so much and things are not quite the same, with all the avenues of dating app and even changing the type of relationship that people are getting into, where are we heading? And is it healthy for us in the relationship and for societies and humanities in general? Those are interesting big questions that perhaps can be looked into in the future. But that's all I have for today. So I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you soon. Bye.